You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast.
Hello, Adele.
Hello, David. Hello, Will.
Hello. Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Common Descent Podcast. This is Spotlight 2024, a special series that we are doing throughout the year where we are talking about science communication with some of our fellow paleontology podcasters. Adele, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just going to out myself out the gate as a Common Descent fangirl. Yeah, I've listened to so many hours of your podcast. It's so well researched. Honestly, I'll listen to one episode and be like, okay, I think I took in 10% because I do it while doing other stuff. And yeah, they're just some of my favorite comfort podcast episodes. When my husband broke his collarbone and I had to drive him an hour and a half in the dark to town, to the hospital, I'm like, we need to listen to Spooky Plants with Ali, because that was just my comfort series at the time.
Well, it's a great thing to listen to in the dark in a crisis moment.
This is amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Listeners, take note if you want to be on the podcast, being a big fan that will say nice things about us. Those are the people who we invite on. Please, before we get started on anything else, introduce yourself for our audience.
Yeah, so my name is Adele Pentland. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a PhD candidate at Curtin University, which is over in Western Australia, but I'm actually based in central Western Queensland, in another state entirely, and I live and work on the traditional lands of the Koa people, and I'd just like to acknowledge all elders past, present, and emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples who might be listening to this episode. I work on pterosaurs. I also confusingly work on dinosaurs, which doesn't really help people work out that they're different groups, but that's absolutely fine. Listen to the Common Descent episodes on pterosaurs and dinosaurs to figure out why they're different.
Episode 79 and a bunch of others.
Yeah. And yeah, last year I started a podcast myself, decided to call it Pals in Paleo, and initially I just kind of researched topics and then would get people to give me sound bites and stuff. Lately I've been doing lots of interviews because it's saving me doing the really hard, heavy research side of things.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of constantly evolving.
Fantastic.
Great. Listeners should absolutely check out Pals and Paleo. It is also a very good paleontology podcast, a great source of information, especially if you like hearing those kinds of conversations with paleontologists about ongoing research. I think it's a really great source for that sort of information.
Thank you. Yeah, I should also mention that it's pretty light, pretty conversational. I do try and sneak in at least one Simpsons reference every episode. And the good thing about doing the interviews as well is that I've been able to ask people how they got to where they are today, to kind of just highlight, yeah, there are lots of people who were dinosaur-obsessed kids when they were little and never grew out of it. But then, yeah, there's other people that initially wanted to do dance and physio, and now they work on giant birds. And yeah, there's not just one path.
I appreciate that a lot, because that's something I think a lot of people get intimidated by, is that there's a correct path to get into science, and that can feel kind of ominous and gatekeepy if you're not already on that path. And so getting to see people from having come to it from different ways is helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely want to try, and also been doing lots of interviews with academics. I'm aware of my own biases towards academics and people who work on vertebrates, so going to try and branch out to talk about people who do more like fossil collection, fossil prep, and paleotourism, because that's another big passion of mine. But anyway.
Cool.
Fantastic. Well, this is actually, we're already starting to talk about the thing that I wanted to ask to keep our conversation going, which is, what do you consider the goals or the mission behind Pals and Paleo?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it feels weird to say it out loud because it's probably never going to happen in my lifetime. But my dream with everything that I do, the research that I do, the work that I do with regional museums, putting fossils on display, and the podcast is to make people aware of, and particularly make Australian kids love and appreciate the fossils that we have here
Mhm.
as much as they love T-Rex and Triceratops and all of those. I don't think it's going to ever happen in my lifetime, but it's the hill I'm going to die on.
Absolutely.
That is an extremely admirable goal.
Because we have some really cool fossils in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
No, 100%.
And like they're as weird as the living animals we have today, if not weirder sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they definitely don't get highlighted often enough. And that, so I appreciate your goal.
Thank you.
Well, and I like that angle that because that's something that I've also sort of reflected on when we look at the Australian fossil record. Australia has this reputation as being a home to a whole bunch of weird and wacky modern day animals, but it was also home to a bunch of weird and wacky fossil animals.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate as well, though. Australia sometimes also has a reputation for not having a whole lot going on with our fossils, or some of the holotypes being a little bit scrappy. So obviously that's something that I'm trying to, I guess, push back against with my academic pursuits.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But another reason why I wanted to kickstart the podcast, and it's been an idea I'd been toying with for several years, but I got to go to a general science conference last year on a scholarship. It's called Science Meets Parliament. So a bunch of scientists meet parliamentarians.
Cool.
And I was talking to a professor in another field, and they were like, "Oh, we have dinosaurs in Australia?" And if I weren't in such, a professional setting, I would have just hunched over on the floor and just started screaming like, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
So while publishing the finds is also really important, if the public don't know these things exist either, what's the point?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. I think that is a really interesting perspective. We have the benefit, being podcasters in paleontology, being science communicators, of doing that SciComm based in a place that is one of the most famous parts of the world for paleontology.
Yeah.
Like, our country is where T-Rex and Triceratops and all that are from, which means that a lot of the work is sort of already partially done for us as we don't have to convince anybody that our country has cool fossils in it. That seems like it's a really interesting, sure, but also, potentially difficult additional obstacle to doing SciComm.
Yeah, I mean, but in saying that, it's kind of a wide open field and stuff. There are other Australian-based podcasts that talk about paleontology, but I'd say we're pretty different. And yeah, another reason why I wanted to do the podcast as well is I've done press releases, I've talked to media and stuff, and I know how time poor journalists are, and they're not always, you might be lucky and you might get to talk to a science journalist, but they might also be covering so many different parts like physics and biomed, like the medical side of things. And, they're scrambling to get their job done. They have heaps of deadlines being thrown at them. So sometimes things get misconstrued or a little bit twisted. And the podcast as well was just a nice way for me to actually have an excuse to chat to people in my field and get to meet them and befriend them essentially, but also let them tell their story. And it being like a longer format as well, like there's no tight deadline. I'm not trying to get, the hard points. I'm happy just for it to be what it is and like a gentle conversation and really hear what they have to say about how they got into their work and what makes their work special.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that because it's like you said, journalists are having to do their job, but it does mean that there's more of a telephone game sort of thing going on, and that things can get rewritten or reinterpreted or misinterpreted, and just the more hands it goes through, and the busier some of those hands might be with other stuff, it just might not get brought forward to the people the way you would have ideally liked it to be. And with this, you're kind of cutting out, I don't want to call them middleman dismissively because they're doing a good job, but like more direct to the source of the people that would be doing those interviews.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that like my interviews are better, but I probably just tend to ask different questions because I have a background in science. And I should also say I worked as a tour guide at a dinosaur museum too. So I kind of have an understanding of like what kind of common questions, I should say, that members of the public want to know. And then if I don't know anything about a topic, then I tend to ask those questions anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really valuable to be able to have conversations about the limitations of different avenues of science communication.
Yeah.
That obviously science journalism is a major source of information for lots of people who are interested in science, and even people who aren't interested in science. And a lot of science journalism is great and it's really valuable to have. But there are some limitations in terms of, like you said, the deadlines. I've done science journalism myself. I've been a science writer, and you're often limited on how many words you're allowed to put in the page, what topics editors are interested in having on the page. Often will be particular to what do we think the audience is? Who do we think what do we think the audience is going to be interested in? I appreciate that you said you don't think that your podcast is necessarily, the one-stop shop for all, the best SciComm. But I think that having multiple avenues, multiple options for people who are interested in engaging in science information is really valuable because it helps to complement different sources of science information that are each dealing with their own limitations.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing as well is that I tend to take a lot of different tangents. Now, for some people, that's not how their brain works, and they might not like that. But, if you don't mind going on a whole bunch of tangents and a meandering conversation, then I don't know, maybe my podcast is the thing that will keep your attention for hopefully an hour.
Yeah. No, 100%. I very much like having them different formats covering the bases for each other on what they can't all do. Any single one do all of it. I would probably have a harder time paying attention to just a singularly focused, lecture than I would a meandering conversation.
So like our podcast,
you
wouldn't listen to.
Yeah. Mine, the way we go about it is a little bit tougher for me. That would actually probably engage my brain a bit more. So there's different kinds of audience members.
Oh yeah, and how like it's presented and then how people would consume it as well, totally different. My focus is completely different when I'm sitting in a lecture theater and I've got a notebook in front of me versus, I don't know, I'm driving and I need both hands on the wheel, or I'm driving manual stick. Or if I'm doing tours and, just kind of want something in the background so that I feel less alone, because I live in a very isolated part of the country. I think the longest I've gone without seeing any other human aside from my partner was 5 weeks. And this is pre-COVID times too.
Right. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the podcast is like selfishly for me as well, just a nice way to interact with people outside of my household.
Yeah. Just to connect.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because I think that this is reflecting on our own experience and talking to other podcasters. I think it is sort of a general theme that a lot of people who get into science communication through podcasting are doing it at least partially for selfish reasons. Like, this is also something that we want to do and that we're interested in. We've talked before on the podcast about how the whole reason we did a news section in our episodes of the podcast is so that we had an excuse to keep up with paleontology news, because otherwise we were falling out of touch with what was going on in the world of paleontology.
Yep.
There's no such thing as true altruism, right?
Right.
That's right.
I think as well, like, it's kind of common to create the podcast that you wish you had. Like, I'm trying to make Pals and Paleo the resource that I wish I had in undergrad because, ironically, I didn't really want to be a paleontologist until I was 22, like at the tail end of my undergrad degree. But I wonder if I had had the podcast to listen to, if I just would have been ravenous and just, been hungry to learn more and more.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that sometimes SciComm, you get the impression that it is being created to be the kind of thing that the people doing it, the science communicators, want for themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I've certainly talked to people who are like, yeah, I wish this existed because I want it. But it's also very admirable, and it's very encouraging to hear from SciCommers who are saying, I want to create the thing that I don't necessarily need now, but which would have been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, give what you didn't receive.
Yes.
And I think it just kind of speaks to that, like, general sentiment with science communication is that you don't have to be an expert on a particular topic. Like, the podcast isn't just on pterosaurs, and that's probably the thing I know best. It's like, you guys don't just talk about crocs and snakes all the time, but if you're able to communicate something that you've learned and help someone who's like a little bit interested, or they don't really know much about that topic at all, then it's a valuable service.
Absolutely.
Although I bet you wish you could just do a podcast on crocs and snakes.
It'd be a lot easier. We'd save a lot of time on research.
A lot less work.
And the quality would just be just never a boring episode. Crocs and snakes all the time. Honestly, that it's one of the main reasons why it's a real shame we haven't made it down to Australia yet.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's like croc and snake paradise.
Yeah.
It would be
So
fantastic.
Yeah, so many. Yeah, you have to come. You'll just have to.
Yes. Just another reason to.
We'll just have to. Tying into this discussion about, you were talking about what you may have wanted as a student earlier in your education. You are a student currently, you're a PhD student. And I certainly don't want to, give the impression that you're like, fresh-faced start of your career. Obviously, you have published, you've been to conferences, you named a new pterosaur very famously. But as someone who is a student, who is an early career scientist, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how your podcasting and how your science communication efforts are a part of your sort of development, personal development as a scientist.
Yeah, so it's really funny that you mention Ferrodraco, the species that I named. And this kind of also ties back to when I worked at the Dinosaur Museum, Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum of Natural History in Winton. Call ourselves the dinosaur capital of Australia. So again, that's where you both have to come. Visit me.
Yes.
So when I worked there, one of the biggest things that I got out of working so closely with that museum, and I'm still affiliated, is how to put together a press release and like how to really make a big splash. And even though we're pretty remote, we're very far away from everything else, still just get people excited and aware of the fossils that we were finding. And yeah, that was just super formative. So I learned not only the skills of that, but I also saw the importance, because as I've sort of mentioned throughout, I live in the middle of nowhere. The closest town to us is like a population of like 800 or 1,000 people. And that includes people on farms like myself. So it's not massive. And that museum was actually started by a sheep farmer. And he found dinosaur bones on his property, and he didn't want to see them leave country and go 14 hours away to the state museum. So he built a dinosaur museum so that it would give people a reason to visit the town and keep the town alive. So that is a really big passion of mine. That's why I love paleotourism as well, because without things like that, towns literally disappear. There's like a critical mass thing, and eventually, the hospital closes, there's no police station. In outback Australia, it'll just be like a pub and maybe a general store, and, once it's like that, it just disappears entirely. So that's like a really big passion of mine. that whole experience really drove home the importance of being a good scientist, or as good as I can be, but also being an effective science communicator. And you mentioned before, I'm not really fresh. I'm actually into my 7th year of my PhD. Shh, don't tell anyone. Because I'm part-time and I help run a farm too. So, but I've
Right.
published a number of papers. One of my supervisors was saying, Adele, you can finish now. I'm like, I don't actually want to, because the way so interestingly, the way things work in Australia is that from the time you finish your PhD, there's like a clock that counts down on different opportunities and things that you can apply for. So I've made the conscious decision to, I started my PhD part-time and then take the full allocated amount. I have a good handle on publishing papers, so that's all well and good, but science communication is something that I have background in. There are grants and awards that I can apply for, and it's all part of the same thing. Like, I don't see the science communication side of things as that separate to being a PhD and being a scientist. Like, it's all part of the one part of my brain.
Yeah. I know that, so it's very common, and we've talked about this on the podcast, that scientists in their formal training and education to be a scientist don't often get the experience in science communication. For you, has science communication been a part of your formal education, or has it been something that you've really had to sort of take your own initiative on?
It's kind of been like an extracurricular activity. So it just so happens that from starting at one uni and then moving to Curtin, where I am now, I haven't had to do any professional development or coursework, which I know quite a few PhDs will have to do. And I'm very happy that I've avoided that, because I have a very great backup plan as a farmer running around chasing sheep and cows. But so a lot of the unis, they would advertise 3-minute theses, which is a science communication competition where PhDs have to try and condense down their thesis, which is like 70,000 to 100,000 words, and explain it in 3 minutes without any jargon. And having worked as a tour guide at a museum, I was like, oh yeah, I can do that, easy. I know how to do public speaking. So I competed in that a few times. I've competed in FameLab, which is very similar. And then Visualize Your Thesis, which is different again. It's more like a video competition. But yeah, I've also applied for grants and awards where you just need to be able to talk about your work and the importance of your work. And, through doing 3-minute theses and FameLab, it helped me with those video applications. So yeah, so I suppose to actually answer your question, it is something that I've naturally gravitated towards because I've done it before, but no one asked me to do the podcast. And I have actually made the conscious decision not to ask my uni or any of the museums that I've worked with before if they want to sponsor it, because I really like my creative control. I really appreciate what you both do, David and Will, and listening to your audience and giving them episodes on things that they're interested in. For me, I'm not at that point where I'm just like, if I'm really not that interested, I cannot bring myself to do show notes and serve up an episode on it. Yeah, it's just very much been something that's been on my mind for a long time, and I decided to get the ball rolling last year. And I'm gonna try and release regularly, which for me is like every 2 weeks, just because if I had to try and do episodes weekly, my brain would explode.
Oh, agree.
Yes.
I think there's so much that I want to follow up on in what you've said, but very quickly, your point about choosing your topics, I think it's really interesting to see how different podcasts, different SciComm efforts are tailored to the people who are doing them. I think it's really interesting that you have made the conscious choice to say, I'm going to pick the topics that I think are interesting, because that allows you to maintain the motivation to do it, to deliver information that you're comfortable with. We've made the decision to let our audience choose the topics for the same reason that if we were choosing the topics ourselves, we would start to lose the motivation. That is a source of motivation for us, that, oh, this is something people want to listen to.
Oh, the accountability.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really fascinating parallel that we have, it's relatively a minor aspect of the podcast, but we've made sort of opposite choices for the same purpose of keeping ourselves engaged in what we're doing.
I think occasionally I have enough people in my life telling me what I need to do. I don't want the podcast to become another one of those things. As much as I love my audience, they are great, but and like I have like a list of topics that people have suggested, and when I eventually get to them, I'll give them a shout out, but it's not, I don't normally get a request and then try and line things up to record on that topic that week. It's normally just something that lives rent-free in the back of my mind.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess, to be fair, it took us most of our first year before we were able to consistently do requested topics.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the reasons we are able to do it is because we have such a list now that there's enough variety there for something to jump out.
We can skip the boring stuff.
Yeah, we can skip the things that I'm not feeling in the mood for. That if I'll go through, I'm like, that will be a great episode
someday.
I don't want to do that episode right now, or maybe ever. That might have to be a David episode because
a guest episode.
Yes,
make someone else do it.
And so it definitely is partially something we had to build up to. And for me, I have a relief in it because now I don't have to think of what I want to talk about. I can just
all the options.
Yeah, I can just scroll and go, there, that caught my eye. That's enough. That's that. Now I can move forward. I don't have to deliberate. I just have to scan a list and go, bingo. That's a fun one.
Yeah.
So it's just whatever works for you.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think was interesting in your sort of recounting of your experience, it sounds like, and you let me know if I'm interpreting this correctly, you were sort of maybe not thrust into science communication is necessarily the way to put it, but having an understanding of paleo tourism that sort of got you invested in it, being involved in press releases for research. I know that Pharaoh Draco got a ton of press attention.
Yeah.
And that I'm sure that had to have been a learn. If you hadn't already learned, that was a learning experience to have to be at the center of all of that media attention.
Oh yeah.
So it sounds like you sort of had to become accustomed to it and learn about it.
I was thankfully already a little accustomed to it, and my mentor, Tricky Sloan, kind of like pet me up, but it was a crazy time. So I talked to ABC, BBC, was featured on Fox News randomly.
Congratulations.
Yay. Every major television station in Australia, Australian Geographic and National Geographic as well.
Oh.
So it's funny, being a tour guide kind of prepared me, I guess, for the emotional labor of being on and, just being really focused, really present. I already know my stuff, but sort of like really being in the moment as well. Because I think the day that it was announced, I have like a list somewhere in an old diary of how many interviews that I did, but it was nuts. And then this was a couple days before the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology meeting in Brisbane, so then I had to talk about it a bunch at the conference too. So I still love talking about Pharaoh Draco, but it's God, I talked about it a lot that week.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you've repeatedly now referenced back to your history as a tour guide. And that's something that we're very biased. We also both have a history of being tour guides at museums. Will, you were at the aquarium. And I think that, alluding to something you said earlier, having that experience of interacting with people who are curious, who are asking questions in that sort of public context really does give you a sense of what are the questions I can expect to have to answer, but also what are the questions that they might not be asking that they either are probably thinking or they haven't thought to ask, that are very common questions that might not come up in this particular interview. It really helps with sort of understanding what the foundation has to be for explaining information about something to people.
Yeah, it was a big part of my life, and I don't think I would approach science communication in the same way if I hadn't worked as a tour guide. If I had been purely academic and had only been to the museum a few times, but then was sort of thrust into that position of having to do so many interviews and stuff, I don't think I would have been able to rise to the occasion.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that it prepared you for the emotional, and just energy burden, because that's something I've seen happen with people that give a talk or have to do a presentation for the first time, and then afterward are like, whew, because they are not used to how actually exhausting it can be to be up at that energy level for an extended period. And yeah, that's one of those things that unless you've been through that, you might not be aware that you're about to be wiped, even though all you've been doing is sitting and talking.
Well, it's interesting that you say like that's all you've been doing, but
Hmm.
sort of being up in front of people, I think,
Yeah.
I don't know, you might be able to correct me on this. There's like a lizard part of your brain that's like, if this goes terribly, they will ostracize you, they will kick you out, and they might eat you, or you might get eaten by a
Yeah.
smilodon or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason why lots of people don't like doing public speaking, because
Hmm.
it is uncomfortable to sort of be up there and have to perform. But yeah, with the emotional labor side of things, just a little secret, I don't tend to record the podcast if I'm super wiped and tired from like
Hmm.
physical labor, or I'm not in a good mood. I like
Yes.
to, and another thing that I'll do, and this is going to sound super corny, is that I try and record while I'm smiling because people can
Yeah.
hear it. And
Yeah.
like one of my little secrets to presenting, whether it's at a conference, whether it's for the podcast, I try and make it look like I'm having fun and I'm enjoying it. Most of the time I am,
Yes.
but it's those 1% unconscious things. And it also ties into like body language. If you were a tour guide speaking to people in person, all of those like little unconscious cues, they are also part of science communication. Of course, like there's what you're saying, but how you say it as well.
Hmm.
It's a big one.
Hmm.
You know,
Yes.
I I had a lecturer, and one of the nicest guys, but he would talk about super volcanoes and it was just a monotone, and it made super volcanoes so boring, and it
Yep.
was so devastating. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, this is such a cool topic. I'm struggling so hard. What is wrong with me?
That used to be my go-to demonstration when I trained tour guides, is I would give a very like eloquent description of the animal we're talking about in a monotone of
Hmm.
like, this is the perfect set of words to use, like nothing wrong with the words I'm using, but I'm going to say it all in this tone, and I'm never going to shift off of this tone, and I'm going to keep it a fairly steady pace, and I'm not going to change up my pace. And I would watch them while being trained disengage, and I go, you see how that feels?
Yeah.
Don't do that to your tours. You
Just,
need to bring that energy. If you're having fun, they'll have more fun.
yeah. Yeah, you can just see their like eyes glaze over.
Yeah. Where you can see now they're having to put effort into paying attention.
Yeah.
And I think that actually is an excellent point, following up on the note of the emotional burden or the mental burden. Like you said, it's easy to think of it as being just talking, but all of that stuff that we were just talking about, what words am I using? What's my body language? What's my tone of voice? Is the sentence that I'm saying going to raise further questions? Do I now need to explain the thing that I just said? All of that sort of mental processing is part of science communication. So when you get to the end of an interview or a tour or something, it's no surprise at all that you're tired and wiped out about it, because it hasn't just been talking. It's been it's a lot of mental energy that goes into being very mindful of what you're doing in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. The nice thing about doing the podcast is that I can just focus on the words and how I'm saying it. I don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, there's a small child going on this dinosaur bone. Please don't sit on that. I need a shepherd. I need to like get them. Oh my gosh, like we're coming up on time. They need to go over here. It's going to be lunchtime, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff that I had to worry about as a tour guide. I don't have to worry about with the podcast. It's very nice.
Yeah. Did I always have 11 people?
Right, yeah, what is this the same? Well, you also don't have to be on the whole time. And if you were doing a podcast and you need to like take a break and go to the bathroom or get a drink of water, you can pause as long as you want because you're editing it and you can cut that out. If it's an interview or if it's a tour at a museum, you are on for that 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it is. The pace is fully set by you, and if you leave that little break, you're going to lose everybody.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. So a tip of our hat to you, our fellow tour guide, for sort of understanding all of the difficulty and the and it's fantastic, and I think that it's really exciting to get to. Like I said, Will and I talk about this on, especially on like our Patreon bonus content. We often refer back to our time as tour guides because it feels like you learn so much in doing that. It made me, I was wondering earlier, you know how you've heard, there's a common phrase that I've heard from people who will say everybody should work at a restaurant at some point. Like everyone should work.
Oh my gosh.
Like a service job.
Yes.
Is museum tour guide the paleontologist's version?
Yeah.
So say every paleontologist should be a museum tour guide at some point to get that interactive experience.
Yeah, and humility as well.
Yes.
I think that's always good. Yeah, it just makes you aware of things that you don't really consider, and I feel like a lot of degrees won't necessarily prepare you for. They're things that you learn on the job.
Well, and because with educating, the public directly, you get immediate feedback.
Oh yeah.
As to whether or not you're making sense. If you write a book or a paper or make a documentary, you don't actually get to see right away whether people go, I'm completely lost in what you just explained. But in a tour, you immediately get that, and so you can very quickly fine tune which words are causing the problem. So for the next tour, so that you can adjust.
Yeah, maybe don't use quadrupedal. Maybe use four-legged for this audience.
Yes, exactly.
So on the topic of museums and giving tours and stuff, a couple times so far in this discussion, you've mentioned the importance to you of paleotourism as part of science communication, as part of engaging people. Please talk more about that.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
What do you feel is the importance of paleotourism? Why is it so important to you?
Oh, I mean, yeah, for non-altruistic reasons, it just means that I don't have to drive another hour and a half to go get a bottle of milk, that the closest town to me will continue to be there, which I appreciate.
I think it's really interesting and maybe not immediately intuitive for a lot of people that paleontology can be an important source of tourism and economic. Will and I, our museum background is at the Gray Fossil Site, which is a place that was preserved as a fossil site in large part because it's 2 minutes off the highway and it could serve as a tourist attraction, a place that draws people in.
Yes. Well, and your story about the farmer wanting to keep them in the town so that it could nourish the town, that tourism could nourish that town, was also a very interesting, specific and more small scale version of what we talk very often about, fossils needing to stay in their home countries. This one is their hometown, like that there's another aspect to fossils staying where they were found than just respecting and acknowledging the people who are from that area. It's also can be about supporting that area.
Yeah. I think one of the really great things about paleotourism is that it invites people into our world and what it's like to possibly be on a dig without having to do any of, without having to do years and years of study at university, and getting to understand and appreciate those fossils, not just in a museum setting where it's sort of, pristine and behind glass, but, out in the field. And I guess come away with the understanding that there's so many different steps in terms of extracting fossils, but also if they're not going to be extracted and they're going to be left in situ in the rocks, how much it takes to, say, build a giant custom building around, I don't know, as an example, over 300 dinosaur footprints over a span of an area of about a tennis court. I'm sort of referencing very loosely the Dinosaur Stampede National Monument at La Quarry.
Yeah.
And it's so much more powerful for me when I get to go out onto a site and see so many fossils in situ. We recently took a trip to New Zealand. We went to Curio Bay, and there are these amazing, massive Jurassic age tree trunks and branches and bits of petrified wood on the coast. And spoiler alert, there aren't a lot of really tall conifers that are native to New Zealand. A lot of the pine trees that you'll see are from plantations and stuff, but it's just, amazing to kind of be like, wow, in this spot, all these years ago, there was this massive forest, but then also this event that just kind of felled and knocked over all the trees. And the first time that I went to see La Quarry, I'm not a religious person, but being in that place and just getting closer to the footprints really brought to life the fact that these dinosaurs were living and breathing in a way that bones don't seem to do for me. I've handled many dinosaur bones. I've flown overstate with them in my suitcase and had to explain it to customs and really panicked and hoping, like, please do not confiscate this. I cannot replace this. But being at La Quarry for the first time and just, it really hitting you just how many there were and that they were around living their lives just filled me with a sense of awe. So if any of the work that I can do can bring someone else to a moment like that, or they get to see a fossil that, has been named relatively recently and they have the understanding of, wow, this is something I could do too, then that is probably more important than the science itself.
No, absolutely.
I think there is undeniably there is something very powerful about not just seeing a fossil, but understanding where it came from, what the process was, being able to stand in the spot. This is something that happens at the Gray Fossil Site a lot. People will come in and maybe they haven't quite registered what the place is, and they'll look at a fossil and go, oh, this is really cool.
They've just turned off. They just saw the turn off on the highway. They just decide to pop in and have a pit break. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And they come in and they're looking at the bones and they're like, oh, that, and I'll be explaining to someone, I'll say, yeah, this is, such and such. This is a mastodon. This is what this bone is. And they'll go, oh, where do these come from? And I'll look 50 feet in that direction.
Yes.
Like the backyard of the museum. And people's just this gut reaction to understanding this didn't come from somewhere out in the world. This came from right here. Yeah. This is the place where this animal died. And we have found that it really is powerful to be able to let people connect with the space. And on the note of tourism, especially when those people are from here.
Yeah.
When people, it's like, yeah, this animal lived in Gray, in the town of Gray, Tennessee. It wasn't the town at the time, but this is the area where it was from. This sort of has that local connection. You and this animal share a home space.
Yes.
Yeah.
It makes it very real. While the thing displays in a museum could feel very conceptual, I think very easily for a lot of people because it's a thing behind glass.
Or very sterile.
Yeah, exactly. And I've met people where they see it and they appreciate it, and then when you mention it being dug up, they'll have that like, oh right, it would have had to be dug up, wouldn't it?
Right. Like, that's where fossils come from.
But it's not dirty right now. It's just there. So it's very easy to not see all of the context that it does have when you only see them that way. Getting to actually see a fossil site, getting to actually see. I loved the footprints, because that's how I always feel when we get new news about like a track site, because like fossils are evidence of the organism, but it's them dead.
Yeah.
Footprints, that was them alive. They did that while they were alive. That's a moment in their life that has been preserved till today. There's something different about that hits different.
Yeah. Speaking to your point about dissociating as well, I've been in beautiful spaces in state museums where there's been no entry fee, it's been free, and some of the best fossils from the area. And people are just going around being like, oh, that's fake, and just telling each other a bunch of nonsense. And I was just like sitting there like, this does my head in. I think with paleotourism as well, if you're taking someone to see a fossil that's in the ground, normally you have to have someone with you. And normally from the process of them being there and showing you the fossils as well, it's just an entirely different experience. And you're sort of more geared to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that this circles around nicely to what we were talking about much earlier in the discussion, that importance that you emphasized of sharing information about the fossils and the cool ancient creatures from your part of the world. That sort of driving home that this is a place that has the, I think it's really easy for us here in the United States to take for granted that when you hear about the coolest fossils in the coolest fossils, the stars of all the dinosaur movies, that's from here.
Yeah.
That's our stuff. And to sort of not acknowledge or understand that for a lot of places around the world that aren't as famous for their fossils, even if they have really cool fossils that just haven't gotten that notoriety, it can leave that sort of, it's an absence of a connection that they could otherwise be having with their own part of the world.
Yeah, the PR machine is not something, to take lightly. The fact that Jurassic Park and Jurassic World has not just dinosaurs from North America, there are other ones, but like there's a lot of North American ones in there. Just to talk about a pterosaur specific example, originally they were meant to have Enhenguera, which is something really close to what I work on, but then they swapped it out for Pteranodon, which is known from America. And then the toy manufacturers and stuff, when people first interact with dinosaurs as kids, and you have your starter kit, party of 6, whatever it is, and they're all mostly from North America, it's very easy, if you don't engage with that further, just to think that's all there is, and to not really look beyond that.
Yeah.
I think we see this in a small way here in Tennessee at the Gray Fossil Site. You'll get kids come in, and kids love to, they come in, they go, oh, bones, fossils, show me your T-Rex. Yes. Where's your dinosaurs? And it falls to us to say, well, okay, we don't have dinosaurs. There's basically no dinosaur fossil record in the state of Tennessee. And if you say that to a kid, the visible disappointment.
Then why is it a state?
Right, yeah. Exactly. Who even cares?
Yes.
No one saw me do that, but it was excitement and then slumping.
Yes.
Yep.
And then having to do the work to sort of fill in, right, okay, but we've got red pandas and we've got mastodons. Look at all these cool animals that came from right out here. And it sounds like it could be a very similar circumstance growing up in a place like Australia, where it's like, oh, T-Rex and Triceratops and Stegosaurus and all these cool dinosaurs. Can I go to my backyard and dig for those? And being told, well, no, because none of those are in this hemisphere. Yes. We're in the wrong part of the world. And the value of getting kids and anybody excited about, but here are the cool things that we do have here that you could, in theory, dig up in your backyard.
Well, and that also very likely are unique to your backyard. That if you go to the other side of the country, they might not have. They don't have that species.
Right. They don't have Ferrodraco.
Yes. And so connecting that to not only do you have cool stuff, but your cool stuff is often unique to like where you are. That carries weight for people.
Yeah. Speaking to the other side of the country, oftentimes that's completely different aged rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, an Australian paleontologist, Dr. Alice Clement, I think she basically said, Australia has, hundreds of millions of years of a fossil record, just because, like, in the West, it's pretty old. And then, broadly speaking, as you go east, it gets younger and younger. But um, it's so complicated as well, just in that we have our dinosaur deposits, but also there's megafauna, so Pleistocene stuff, like in the mix. Like in the early days out here, they were digging up a sauropod, a long-necked dinosaur. Think of Littlefoot from The Land Before Time. They had, I think, the femur of one of those, and then they found the skeleton of a wombat next to it. And initially, they were like, "Yeah, we found a tiny dinosaur," and then we're like, no, what's going on here? So I guess as well, in explaining to people that no, we don't actually have a T-Rex, you also just get to engage with the concept of deep time,
Yes.
which isn't something that comes up, I guess, in everyday life, which again is just, it's something else entirely. And if people grew up with faith as well, and they might be like a little bit skeptical of how old the earth is and all that kind of stuff, that's a big meaty discussion unto itself as well.
No, it really is.
Getting to have that first step into the discussion already handled by people having an intuitive understanding of there is a fossil record where I'm from, these are the kinds of things that are found here, can be a really big help.
And changing climate as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. You mentioning the Pleistocene megafauna made me think of, that's always been one of my biggest pet peeves for paleo documentaries, because, and we've talked about this before, that lots of times paleo documentaries kind of hit the same notes and can feel very samey because they show the same locations and the same ages and the same creatures. And I have always bemoaned the fact that there's never been one that just took a episode or a whole documentary to just go through Australian Pleistocene megafauna and show a lot of the really unique creatures that it's like, yeah, you're not going to find anything else on the planet shaped like this because it was only here. And they just they don't get put to screen almost ever, and that's such a shame.
Yeah. Well, and I think it speaks to our conversation has been very like dinosaur focused for the most part, because they're awesome. But being excited about Australian fossils and the Australian geologic record should, in theory, be very easy, because not only are there super cool Mesozoic stuff, there's really awesome Pleistocene Ice Age stuff. And also, Australia has some of the oldest rocks and fossils on the whole planet.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much cool stuff in the geologic record down there that it's a real shame to register that there are so many people who don't already have that sort of bouncing around in their head.
Yeah. Speaking to the Pleistocene stuff, I've done like a few interviews with people who work on that, and a lot of them are just so, I guess, aggravated with the comparisons to animals from other continents. Take Thylacoleo, for example, the marsupial lion, in air quotes.
Yep.
It's not a lion. Like, it doesn't walk like a lion, and its dentition started out completely differently. All these things that, like, I didn't realize either. But if, just as a little heads up, I do believe ABC, so the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, I believe they're going to do a special during National Science Week, which is in August. And I know they filmed at Lake Callabonna, which is a Pleistocene megafauna site. And they're going to talk with Dr. Aaron Kamens, who I'm going to have on an upcoming episode. And they're going to do some Thylacoleo bite force experiments and stuff. So
nice.
I'm not sure how close it will be to what you wanted, but there's something like it in the works, and it's coming soon. It's a start. And yeah, I just have like a long list of like people I need to talk to about, as you mentioned, the Ediacaran fauna. So some of the earliest multicellular life on Earth. Now, it's a little bit complicated because they're impressions left in rock, and I can't remember which one of my lecturers told me, but it would be like if someone tried to take a mold of my face using golf balls and then interpret that as a fossil. But it's still like incredibly important, and as technology gets better, might be able to do more with fossils that they have. And you can see some of those early multicellular life forms as well. I believe they've sort of put some infrastructure in place in, I think it's somewhere in the Flinders Ranges. Not 100% certain on this. But yeah, you can go out onto site and see it. Now, in summer, it will be like 40 degrees Celsius, which is bloody hot. But maybe go in winter. But again, like, you can go out there.
That's for our American listeners, that's 1,000,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
But how many football fields is that?
Right.
How many giraffes?
Yeah.
It's roughly this many bananas.
Do you dream of having a Jurassic Park style movie that focuses fully? Do we need like a Jurassic Down Under entry in the franchise to drum up all of that excitement?
Oh, 100%. I already have the Velociraptor equivalent picked out. It's going to be Australovenator winternensis for
Excellent.
sure.
Yes.
Unless some bigger theropods turn up.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think that would be super powerful. But again, like, the budget and the scale of productions as well makes a massive difference, because Dr. Aaron Kamen's mentioned to me that there is a movie called, I believe it's called Carnifex.
Yep,
There sure is.
I haven't seen it, but it's about a thylacoleo that is stalking and hunting humans, I believe.
Yep.
But again, like, that was a relatively small scale thing, not made by Universal Studios. So yeah, the PR machine.
Yeah. I think the one that I'm most disappointed didn't do more with it is the, love them or hate them, the Ice Age movies. Because they found an excuse for a way to put dinosaurs in those. You couldn't have had them visit Australia.
Put a diprotodon in there.
Yeah, like that would have been fantastic to go through and have them interact with a whole bunch of just vastly different mammals.
Yeah. You have Megalania. How are we not?
Yes.
Studios aren't talking to the right people.
No.
They're not being told about the right animals.
Yeah.
Megalania, by the way, is a giant varanid, like a giant goanna.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Giant monitor
lizard. I think if it was standing, Queensland Museum, in their Dinosaurs Unearthed exhibit, which is free, they have a life-size replica, and I believe when it's standing up on its back legs, it's, I'm going to say, close to 2 meters tall. So what would that be? Over 6 feet. Big and muscly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like 7 feet tall.
Yeah. So cool.
One other thing that I did want to bring up, at least mention, on the note of being mindful of what is unique to Australia, the importance of fossils to the place that they're found. Another thing that stands out to me about your podcast, and I think it stands out because it's not something that's quite as common over here, is that you acknowledge on the episodes of your podcast the people who live in the area where you're working, where fossils are being found.
The acknowledgement of country. So I live and work on the traditional lands of the Koa people. That's where I'm recording my end of the podcast episode. And it just makes people aware that, and I would like to do this with some of the megafauna episodes in the future as well, is not only do we have like these scientific names, these nicknames, for better or worse, marsupial lion. But then there are also other names that these animals have been known by from different language groups, and that the names of different fossil localities, they've had names that go back thousands of years as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that I need to get better at, particularly when there's fossils like, say, Diprotodon that are found in a bunch of different locations.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we don't really see that in museums, and it's not an easy thing because there's one school of thought that fossils should not be removed from country entirely, but the technology's not there where we can scan and get 3D models of bones entirely in the ground. And if they're not taken, then they will be lost forever in places with very intense erosion. So I'm still navigating and figuring that out, but since the podcast is very much on my own terms, like I feel comfortable, just trying to do that. And one of the big things with the podcast as well that I haven't really mentioned before is I want it to be an inclusive space, which is why I don't like to use a ton of jargon if I can avoid it without constantly interrupting my guests and trying to explain like every second term. I try and strike the balance between like that and explain jargon, but also I would hate for someone who is Aboriginal to listen to my podcast and to not feel respected. That's really important to me.
Yes. Yeah. Disregarded or forgotten.
Absolutely. At the last conference I was at, there were very few paleontologists of diverse backgrounds. And if the podcast can also help promote diversity, inclusion, and equity, then we're all better off because this is problem solving. And if everyone has the same background and viewpoint, you're probably not equipped to really do that problem solving stuff. But if you have someone that has a unique and different perspective, why wouldn't you listen to that?
Yes.
I think it's a mentality that thankfully is becoming more and more prevalent in paleontology. I think those sort of land acknowledgements of the communities of people who are native to an area, who have been in an area for a long time, are something that we're starting to see more and more in science communication. I've seen it in a bunch of Canadian sources, like museum announcements and such. I've heard it from Australia. I don't hear it as much here in the US, which hopefully that is also something that will continue to improve. But driving home that part of being respectful and mindful and inclusive when it comes to paleontology is not just acknowledging the process that recovers these fossils and the people who are doing it, but where it came from and the people who live in the places where they are coming from and the people who have lived in those places and the people who have relationships with this land or these fossils.
Or the animals directly.
And with the animals directly.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that is a really important story. It seems to me to be a really important part of that conversation we've been having about acknowledging the importance of acknowledging where fossils come from, what fossils are distinct to what places, and how fossils are tied to certain areas and to certain people around the world.
Yeah, it's all part of understanding and the context of that fossil, the cultural context as well as the geological context. If I'm not interpreting the rocks where my fossil is from, I might be missing a huge part of the story. If I read those rocks correctly, I might be able to find the rest of the animal just, a meter and a half behind me, a few feet behind me. And then, if I'm not listening to people who have direct observations of megafauna and how they interacted as well, like I'm missing out on telling that story to the best of my ability.
Yes.
I mean, this is very easy for me to say as well because I don't do a lot of work with megafauna stuff and I work on groups that have been extinct for like 65 million years. But again, like if I didn't do the podcast, I probably wouldn't be thinking about this stuff on the same level. Yeah, this will be like constantly evolving and I'll probably continue to wrestle with this because who knows? I currently work on, pterosaurs and dinosaurs, but who knows what I'll be working on once I finish my PhD, once I get past this student phase.
Absolutely. Adele, thank you so much for joining us to talk about science communication and your podcast. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to say about science communication? Any thoughts to leave our listeners with?
Anyone can be a science communicator. If this is something that interests you, again, don't feel like you need to be an expert. If you just have a unique perspective or voice, then I would definitely say like go for it, because I'm sure people have told me the same thing multiple times, but for whatever reason, my brain won't take something in until someone else says it a particular way. Maybe, someone who's an expert in the field, they're operating on a whole different level, and the words that they'll use to explain something are different to how a student might explain it as well. And then, yeah, if it's just also really powerful. And I've gotten a few messages before saying it's inspiring for little girls to see someone like me working in the space, and just the realization that not all paleontologists are old, straight, white, cis guys.
Yes.
And that, yeah, there's diversity in the field, and the more diverse voices that we have, the better. And then, yeah, if you want to listen to Pals and Paleo, it is spelt Palaeo. It is got two A's in it, Paleo.
Yes. Please do plug your own anything that if you want to point people at your museum, at your podcast, if there's anything else you want to shout out, please take the floor and do so.
Well, it's definitely not my museum, but yeah, if you're ever
Adele's
in
museum
central Western
in
Queensland,
Australia.
yeah, that's what the A is for. No, Australian Age of Dinosaurs, not Adele's Age of Dinosaurs, is, yeah, just an incredible organization that I still work really closely with. You can come out on their dinosaur digs. They're currently in the recruiting stage for the next round of tour guides as of this recording, and you can also volunteer in the fossil lab. They've got work experience students as well. So if you're based in Australia and want to make the journey out to see the dinosaur capital of Australia, please do that. And then while you're at it, go up the road, go to Kronosaurus Corner, which has like Australia's best plesiosaur. She's beautiful. Her name is Penny. Visit her, give her a big smooch for me. And then, yeah, you can keep up to date with me on Instagram. I'm Paleodel, Paleo spelt again, Palaeo Del. Otherwise, you can search Adele Pentland. It might pop up, who knows? And then, yeah, the Instagram handle for the podcast is Pals and Paleo, all one word. And you can subscribe. However you're listening to this episode, you should be able to find Pals and Paleo. And yeah, dive in, listen to some particularly Australian-fueled fossil episodes where I try and talk about the form, function, and family grouping, because I didn't want to say phylogeny of different fossils. I have a big bias towards Australian stuff because I'm Australian and I've done all my university training in Australia, so that's kind of what I know best. But yeah, hopefully it's a helpful resource, and yeah, I'm gonna just keep trying to do episodes as consistently as I can while trying to finish my PhD. What could go wrong?
All the luck to you.
Well, listeners,
Thank you.
absolutely check out Pals and Paleo. I hope especially that our non-Australian listeners will check it out. And I also hope that our Australian listeners, if you're Australian and you aren't familiar with Pals and Paleo or with Australian Age of Dinosaurs, here's a thing that is in your very country, which I know might mean like time zones away from you, but still it's in your country and you can check it out.
Yeah, it might only be thousands of kilometers away. It's fine.
Yeah, hop and a skip.
Just up the road.
Listeners, do keep your ears out for more episodes of Spotlight 2024. We've got a bunch of other podcasters who we are interviewing with similar conversations about science communication, in addition to your regularly scheduled program of Common Descent episodes. Thank you all for listening. Adele, one more time, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really fun conversation.
Really, really has.
Thank you so much. You two are like the gold standard for paleontology podcasting in my eyes. Yeah, it's very cool it's very cool that you asked me to jump on when I don't have that many episodes on board, but yeah, this has been great.
Every podcast starts somewhere. It starts out with a year of episodes, and then it turns into who knows what.
Starts with one episode that no matter how many times you recorded, I recorded mine 3 times. It's always cringe to listen to when you listen back. So,
Oh man, we have talked about this a lot recently. We do not listen to our early episodes. Absolutely not. They're the worst. Adele, you are doing a great job. Your podcast is awesome. Your research is awesome. Best of luck with continuing your podcast. Best of luck with your PhD, and best of luck with all your other science and SciComm efforts. We're rooting for you.
thank you so much. Bye, David. Bye, Will.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.